Hello and welcome back to Truss Issues, the podcast where we were supposed to be tracking the first 100 days of Liz Truss's premiership, seeing how she got on and if she managed to deliver on her promises. Unfortunately though, we're going to need a rebrand because as we're about to discuss in today's podcast, we have a new Prime Minister.
We do indeed.
Yeah. Our fifth in a good few years, right? It's not been that long. We're rattling through them. We haven't got any good names yet, so we need a rebrand.
Yeah, exactly. Before we get into Dishy Rishi.
Go on.
Yeah, we should... Everyone, please leave your best new title suggestions in the comments because we need a title that is as good as Truss Issues and we can't...
And I don't have to explain why Truss Issues is good, but it's clearly good.
It is good, yeah.
Because we're meant to be tracking her. Is she being trustworthy? Trust issues. I don't know if they got... have you picked up on that yet?
Having said, I don't want to explain why it's good.
I did, though. Okay, so, yeah, we need a new title, but that's not all the countries got that's new.
Oh, great segue. Very good.
Terrible. Also, that delay. Actually, I want to promote the store.
Well, let's
promote the store.
Promote the store.
How are you going to cut this?
I'm not. Carry on.
Go, just go.
So I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but they normally start with a good 5 minutes of adverts you have to skip over. We've never done an advert on this podcast unless you watch on YouTube, in which case, whatever. But the podcast.
Yeah.
And I feel like with Truss Issues coming to an end, we need to rectify that and at least do one advert for ourselves. So I just wanted to let you know that all of our pin badges that we used to promote all the time in videos are on a crazy fire sale at the moment because we're running out of room in the office and we just don't want them about anymore. And we've got so many of them and it feels like a waste for us to hoard a bunch of metal which has engraved on it like enamel pins that we made. So essentially, they're looking for good homes, and we've cut the prices so low that you're just going to be angry with me that we're even doing it. Each pin badge you want is $1.99, down from $5.99, Ben.
I know, it's an amazing discount, Jack.
Then, better still, if you pick a mystery pin badge, where we'll select one at random, it's 99p.
Wow.
What can you get for 99p
honestly,
these
and
days?
I shouldn't come clean about this.
Yeah.
Shipping's going to cost you more than that.
Well, I mean, we are making a loss in some of them.
99p we're making a loss.
Yeah, there you go.
We want a shot of them. We've got so many.
I love how you started this advert with, I just thought you should know, as if it's some sort of public service announcement.
Is. But no, this is where the public service announcement comes in. They're 99p if you want a mystery one, but if you want 5 mystery ones, do the maths on this, $3.49. Wow. That's cheaper.
It is cheaper.
Then
that is the sort of maths that Liz Truss could never do.
How much it is for 10?
Oh, I don't know, Jack. It must be more than £10.
No, it's not. It's not. You're right, though. Retail price, if you bought them individually, would be $59.90. But if you buy them today, £4.99.
That is a steal, Jack. That's amazing.
Honestly, it feels like a scam.
It feels like
TLDRnews.co.uk/store. Should we do adverts more often, do you think? Was that successful?
Felt like teleshopping.
It did, but in the worst way. Okay, so... this weekend, a lot has happened. Last time we spoke, Liz Truss had just stepped down as Prime Minister. We were waiting to find out who our new Prime Minister would be. We knew the schedule, we knew the timetable, we knew who was likely to become kind of the popular people to back. Over the weekend, it kind of emerged who the kind of 3 main contenders were, although, as we'll come on to, 3 is maybe slightly generous. The main ones, though, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, and Penny Mordaunt. Boris Johnson was one everyone was looking at over the weekend, primarily at least, because Rishi Sunak very quickly emerged as kind of a front runner, and also he managed to clear the 100 backers threshold that you needed to meet in order to qualify. He managed to cross that pretty quickly, so he was past it. Boris Johnson was the one everyone was looking at, seeing was he going to run and was he going to meet the threshold. So what did we hear over the weekend? What were the developments we got kind of as the time played out?
Well, on Saturday it was Johnson sort of made his way back to the UK. He was on holiday, so there was a couple of pictures released of him, or they were put out on Twitter of him on the plane coming back. So the thought process was that he'd be jetting back to the UK to try and get his campaign going. So he's trying to garner support, trying to get past this 100 MP threshold so that he could be on the ballot. He seemed to be doing that all over the weekend. There's a lot of speculation as to whether he would surpass 100. If he did, then it would likely be him and Sunak going to the membership vote, which could be quite a sort of bitter showdown. There was then some reports that Johnson was meeting with both Sunak and Mordaunt individually to try and basically to try and show that they were still unified, that they could come to some sort of agreement to present the Conservative Party as as a unified party, because there's been a lot of division, a lot of fractures, a lot of controversy at the minute with them. No agreement was reached with anybody. So Johnson, then it was revealed, was it last night, Sunday night?
Yeah, it was late on Sunday night.
Yeah, that Johnson was no longer going to be running. He wouldn't be putting his name forward. He claimed that he got enough to surpass 100 MPs.
Yes.
I know that you think that this probably didn't happen.
So
he claimed he got 102.
In his remarks on Sunday night when he backed out the race, he claimed 102.
Yes.
Previously, though, on Saturday night, it was being reported that sources close to him said they already had 100. So, I mean, we can get onto the maths in a minute, but across the weekend, there was speculation about how many votes he got. People thought he had 100, or at least it was being said that he had 100. But publicly, you're looking at between 60 and 63 for official named backers. So we don't know for sure whether he did meet the 100 threshold. Zach, you have opinions?
Well, no, I think maybe he did meet the 100 threshold. I think on a piece of paper somewhere in his team's office, there were 100 names who had sort of said provisional yeses. But I think he probably had 60 to 70, maybe 80 yeses.
Yeah.
And then a fair few of those would have been like maybes. Because if the last couple of months has taught us anything, it's that most Conservative MPs are quite transactional. And I think there would have been a whole load of them who were thinking, oh, I'm going to back Boris in the hope that he gets through the membership and then wins, and then I can get a ministerial position. But they were probably also thinking, once it becomes clear that Rishi's going to win, I'll switch over to him. Yeah. So I think that he would have had maybe 75 yeses and then something like 25 sort of, maybes / if you're going to win, I'll jump on your horse.
Yeah. And that does kind of make more sense, because the speed of growth of his campaign, if he was genuinely to have hit 100 yeses on Saturday night, to then have only reached 102 through an entire day feels weird. And even if he did reach 102, there's obviously some speculation that would he really have dropped out. We know Johnson fairly well as a political player at this point. Can we imagine him dropping out if he genuinely thought he could win? Because if he did go to the membership vote, he likely had pretty good odds, right?
Yeah, but I suppose the other way of looking at it is that he's seen what happened with Truss.
Yes.
Truss was brought down because she couldn't unify the party. The party was divided. And just let's not forget that Truss never had the support of the full party in terms of its MPs. She lost the MP vote. They backed Sunak. She had the support of the membership. So I suppose Johnson might be looking at that and was slightly worried that if he did then become Prime Minister this week, that he'd inherit a divided party. He might have got a majority of MPs, but to be fair, that's sceptical. And almost certainly Sunak would have got more. And there's still a huge division between Johnson and Sunak at the minute, because the Johnson backers look at Sunak and see them as, the group that stabbed him in the back. Yeah. And Sunak backers ousted Johnson a couple of months ago. So, it would have caused a real rift in the Conservative Party if he did become the Prime Minister, and he might have sort of assumed, I wouldn't be able to heal that. So I think what's probably happened is that he's looked at all that, thought, I'm not going to be able to unify the party right now. Yeah. I'll sit back, wait for Sunak to either lose the election, be ousted himself, things to go badly, etc., and then he'll put his name forward in the future. It's interesting that in his sort of letter saying that he's not going to stand, he's still sort of alluding to the fact that sort of now isn't the right time, as in he is going to come back at some point. He's still going ahead with this idea that the book isn't closed yet on him being Prime Minister again.
It's such an incredible statement. Like, it's the most, I use the word self-assured in the video we wrote. It's the most arrogant statement I think I've seen a professional politician put out in the UK, at least. It's very Trumpian. All that stuff. Just
saying it can be guaranteed that I'd be able to win the next election.
Yeah.
I would win the next election.
I think he described his own victory as a massive win when he's talking about his 2019 victory. It has very you didn't dump me, I dumped you vibes. Yeah, but I think what's interesting is also the fact that we all agree implicitly that his ego is just too big for this to be out of goodwill. Yes. It's clearly transactional, it's clearly self-interested in some sense. And I think it's
I suppose then the question is,
what is
was it because he didn't have the votes and it was just about to be embarrassed and he can't have that because that will diminish his kind of weight within the party? Or was it he either thought there needs to be more unified, or he just thought this is actually a terrible time to be a Prime Minister because you're coming into more months of badness?
It sounds like he believed he had the votes. Yeah. And maybe he did. It's very, very possible. I think it was what Ben alluded to a second ago, which is that I think he would have been told that there was enough anti-Johnson sentiment in the parliamentary party that he wouldn't have had a functioning majority had he become leader. And then there's not really much point being leader. And then you go into general election at a very, very tough time. So I think that's what he would have been told.
And I think he does think that I think, as you're saying, that the letter reads as very sort of arrogant and self-assured. And I think that his mindset is that the Tory party are absolutely begging for him to come back.
Yeah.
So he'll pick and choose when he comes back.
Sure.
And he's thought now isn't the time.
Now's not the time. Well, it's interesting either way. Regardless, he dropped out of the race. It's not just people on Twitter that are speculating about the true numbers. Sunak's own camp, or certainly some within Sunak's camp, have suggested that it's not true that Johnson ever reached 100. I guess we'll never properly find out because, you say, a lot of it is kind of just lists on paper.
Yeah.
Like, there's not... It's a wild system that this is how it works.
It's the classic 1922 committee just being,
Weird.
shady and not releasing anything and just being deliberately obstructive.
Well, with that good news about how democracy works, Sunak was able to cross the line. He, in fact, managed to get more than 50% of MPs to back him, which is a good sign for party unity? ?
Yeah, I think the Conservative Party are quite keen. I think they've been quite keen since Truss resigned to try and just have one unity candidate.
Yeah.
It has. I don't think it's worked exactly as they wanted. I think they were hoping that one person would put their name forward and everyone would back them, which hasn't quite happened. I think they would have liked some agreement between, for example, Mordaunt and Sunak, which again didn't happen. But the fact that it didn't go to the membership, I think it's by design that this whole leadership election isn't how it normally goes.
Yeah.
It has been designed to try and massively reduce the chances of it going to the membership. The fact that it was a 100 MP threshold is massive. The fact that it's such a collapsed timetable as well, like it is deliberately designed and it's worked as they intended. So I think
it almost makes you question the design of the whole process. The fact that it was so truncated and the fact that the threshold was so high, it maybe kind of explains why the plans of how the membership were ever going to vote were so shaky. The kind of like, it'll be online, 20,000 Conservative members don't have email addresses anyway, which is wild on its own. The concerns about privacy. I think they clearly saw that this was the ultimate outcome. So all those questions were kind of interesting because they're fun for us to talk about on a podcast, but they always knew it probably wasn't going to matter. They kind of guessed that there was going to be one clear enough winner.
But they had to, just very quickly, they had to act as if it could go to the membership because it's quite awkward for them because the MPs chose Sunak in the last leadership election, but the members chose Truss. So if the MPs, if they just said it's just MPs voting, and they're going to obviously choose Sunak, then the membership are going to start questioning, hold on a minute, why did we? Whereas if it looks like, the membership will get a say unless it's really overwhelming that they back one candidate. They go, it was the MPs there's only one name that went forward. We couldn't possibly have you vote on it. It makes it was of deliberate design.
So Sunak managed to be the only one who got through. Johnson claims he got through, but pulled out. Mordaunt never made the numbers, at least. I mean, she didn't even claim to at any point, as far as I know. And then pulled out moments before the official results were due, which left just Sunak, who is now our new Prime Minister. Are you, either of you at all surprised by this result? Either the fact it's Sunak, or how it played out, or even just the fact that there wasn't any formal agreement between Sunak and Mordaunt that was speculated about? Is this kind of how you thought it would play out, or is this surprising in any way?
Well, I think the end result is probably what we all expected. Yeah. But I do think that actually it was tighter than A, the 1922 committee would have hoped, and B, than we expected. I don't think that when the 1922 committee was designing the rules, they were clearly hoping for a coronation. They were clearly hoping that it would be only Sunak who would make it through that threshold. But Johnson at least came close, and as Ben mentioned a second ago, Mordaunt was fighting until 5 minutes before the deadline. So I think that doesn't bode well for party unity or for the 1922's sort of administrative capacity or hold over the party. But I think the Sunak outcome was sort of what everyone expected. It's what the bookies expected until there was a brief Boris spike on Saturday. But for the most part, the odds were firmly in Sunak's favour. So,
Ben, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, as Zach said, it is what we expected. Sunak, I think, the only sort of threat that he had was it going to a membership vote with Johnson, but that was kind of a shaky possibility because of the fact that he might not get the numbers. But I think that the odds were at the end of last week that it would probably be Sunak. It was either going to be, as I said on the podcast last time, it was either going to be Sunak outright, which is what's happened, or it was going to be Sunak versus Johnson, which it probably could have been had Johnson not pulled out. So I think it was, there's not been any sort of left field thing that's happened. It's kind of gone as we expected.
Going forward then, obviously Sunak has to form a cabinet. He's got to introduce whatever new policies he wants to. We're going to see probably a fairly big change from at least Truss's initial promises. Obviously she changed on her own promises even when she was in government. But what do you think we can expect over the next kind of few weeks, months when it comes to the beginning of Sunak's premiership? Obviously we got some indication over the summer when he ran first time, but this time there's been almost zero policy talk. So what do you think we're expecting from Sunak's first days and months?
So I think he's in the similar predicament to what Truss and Kwarteng were in only a couple of weeks ago, that the markets are still not best pleased with the fiscal state of the UK, and he will have to somehow balance the books, whatever that really means. He's either going to have to raise taxes or cut spending. In good news for Sunak, just by mere virtue of him being there, the markets have calmed already. Gilt yields, this is super boring, sorry, but gilt yields are already down by about 30 basis points at 0.3%. And in practice, that will save the government something like £7 billion a year, which is significant. You know, it's sort of like it's 20% of the black hole that they've got to cover. But nonetheless, it's only 20%. You still have a fair bit to cover. And I think if the European experience tells anything, is that you don't want to get stuck in a doom loop of being beholden to markets and having sort of permanently higher than average interest rates. So he will have to balance the book somehow to calm the markets. I think that's the really difficult thing for him. There are, as we've mentioned this so many times, but there are just no politically easy cuts available. And equally, tax raises aren't politically easy, especially during cost of living crisis.
And especially when his own party only weeks ago was celebrating cutting taxes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be difficult for him. I don't know what he'll do. My instinct is a bit a combination of the two. I think what you should expect to see is some sort of increase on taxes. I think it will somehow be either a freeze on the basic rate of income tax, or sort of stealth tax on the general population, or hitting higher income earners, because I think that's politically the only popular thing. Which would be interesting, because it's like it goes to show how much the Tory party are beholden to like both politics and the markets if they do that. And then I think you should expect to see some cuts. So I think that some potential areas for cuts. I don't think anything left in welfare. I think a really controversial but very possible one would be cuts to defence spending, or at least freeze on defence spending, which would go down very, very badly with Ben Wallace, who's said that he will only remain in post as long as the government is committed to raising defence spending to 3% by the end of the decade.
Which is very high.
It's massive. And it's the sort of thing that was clearly very popular and makes some sense. I mean, some people do think it makes sense, but it is well and above the NATO target, and it's the sort of thing that, were Ukraine not in the headlines, any cost-cutting chancellor would be looking towards. So I think that's what will be happening. I think cabinet-wise, I think this is what he'll do, and I think it's a good idea. He just wants to get safe pairs of hands, reassure everyone. So keep Hunt in chancellor. Probably someone like Michael Gove back at Levelling Up. Probably maybe someone like Sajid Javid at Health. Therese Coffey at Work and Pensions. All these people who have experience in those relevant departments, and just sort of steady the ship, and hope that the markets turn their attention to someone else, and we end up with borrowing costs similar to what they were a year ago, or not a year ago, at least similar to what other G7 countries are looking at. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think the difficult thing for Sunak will be that the cuts and the tax raises are going to be unpopular. And the provisional polling that's been done before Sunak actually got in, there was a couple of polls that basically asked people hypothetically, if Sunak was in, what would you vote? Do suggest that he's still between sort of 10 and 20 points behind Labour. And that's still election wipeout territory. And if he ends up doing ideologically unpopular things like tax raises and spending cuts, and those translate into further poll drops, then you can see how a parliamentary party, of which at least some fraction are basically just tolerating him because he's the least worst option, they have to like show party unity, will lose patience. You know, you can imagine the Boris Johnson loyalists after a couple of months of being 20 points behind Labour and raising taxes and cutting defence spending, for example, which would go down very badly amongst them, that they will just go, we've had enough of this sensible nonsense, let's get Bojo back.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I completely agree with all of that. I think he's going to be the first Prime Minister since Theresa May who is actually willing to do unpopular things that are right, that he believes is right for the country. I think he's definitely going to raise tax. I think he was quite clear about that last time he ran. He's going to have to make spending cuts. Yeah. They are unpopular, but as we saw with Truss, she wasn't willing to do anything that was perceived, and Johnson was the same. He didn't want to do anything that was perceived as unpopular.
Yeah, Truss wants to do loads of unpopular things. Every individual Truss policy is super unpopular. She's famously said, I want to be unpopular.
With her base. I should have made that clear.
Yeah, but I mean, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
We're with Truss with her base, with Johnson with the wider country. But I think that, in a sense, Rishi is willing to do things that people, whether it is their base, whether it is the country, find unpopular.
Sure.
Because he thinks it's the right thing to do. And I think that this was made clear with the fact that he is going to raise tax, make spending cuts, etc. On the cabinet point, I completely agree with all of that as well. I think he's probably going to try and come across as the unity candidate. I think this was what we've been saying over the weekend, is that the Tories were crying out for a unity candidate. And I think one of the ways he might do that is to at least appoint at least Mordaunt to a key position.
Yeah,
that's a good
possibly
point.
Foreign Secretary. Could be something else, but certainly in the cabinet somewhere, just to try and be, bring the party back together. I think that's what he's going to try and be. I think he's just going to try and, steady the ship, try and be a bit more boring. I think that's in their interest, is to stay out the headlines, steady the ship, calm the markets, and I think that's his job over the next few months, and I think that's what he's going to try and do.
So before Truss went, we were talking about polling, and we were talking about the comparison between Labour and the Conservatives and the odds looking forward to 2024 or whenever the next election will be. I think even taking into account the fact that Sunak is going to have to do some unpopular things, I think, are we in agreement that Sunak stands a better chance at the next election than Truss would have done if she'd stayed on?
Oh, yeah. The polling suggests it. And what is actually the last thing I'll say on that? The polling suggests it. But B, there was a poll done by YouGov that asked people, the question was if Truss stayed on until 2024, and Labour had a 46-point lead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
that is ridiculous.
It's crazy, isn't it?
46 points.
Yeah. So if we're in agreement that Sunak is improving things, just his mere presence, even if he is doing unpopular stuff, do we think the dial is being moved significantly there? Because previously, if it was going to be a Truss in 2024, I think we were all in agreement that Labour pretty much had it in the bag, or at least had very good odds. What do we think it looks like now with Starmer going up against Sunak?
I think it's going to be more tricky. I think that Zach and I have had a disagreement on this on a number of occasions about Sunak's ability to communicate. Yeah. I think this just comes back to this again. I think there are occasions where he does come across as a bit petty. There's been stuff about his wife's tax affairs where he came across as a bit petty. But there were other times where he has been quite slick. His campaign was run in quite a slick way. He definitely came across as the most professional in the leadership election, the earlier one this year.
Yeah.
So I think that might make him a little bit more difficult. But if he does have to do unpopular things, and to be fair, 24 is a long way off, but if he still has to do unpopular things, I think Labour is still going to be ahead. I just think it's going to be tighter.
Sure. But you still think?
But I still think if I had to say right now, and it's so far off and all this, I want to put all the normal caveats on, but if I had to say right now, probably still Labour, but just tighter.
Majority or?
Majority,
coalition,
yeah, majority.
Zach?
Yeah, I think my base case is also still a Labour majority. I think that's the most likely outcome, but then again, I think that's probably sub 50%. It's just the most likely of all the outcomes. On the media thing, I still stand by my original take, which is that Sunak isn't a very good media performer, and the times when he is a very good media performer is basically when he's feeling confident he's doing something popular. I think unfortunately for Sunak, the next 2 years are going to be filled with doing unpopular things and being significantly behind Starmer. And I don't think he's cut out for that sort of thing, media-wise. I don't think the media thing will make much of a difference, though. I think that the main thing will just be the economics and how that pans out over the next 2 years. This is a sort of redundant question because no one knows how it's going to pan out. I mean, again, if anything, the last couple of years taught us anything, it's that, national economies are subject to the global macroeconomic winds, and incumbent governments get fucked by it, and they can't really help it. So if inflation subsides, we're in the money, and maybe Sunak can come back in 2024 saying, look, I stabilised the ship, don't worry about it. China invades Taiwan, inflation kicks up, he's probably buggered. So we're all buggered in that case, though, to be fair.
Lovely.
But you see what I mean.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, so
I do
just
think
can't
as
tell.
well, in the next time we do this, Prime Minister's questions will have happened this week.
Yes.
Which should be his first.
Mhm.
There's no reason that he won't be there.
Yeah.
So you'd expect that. I think that would be a good indication
That will
of
be interesting.
his communication stuff.
Yeah.
I know I completely agree. The economy is going to be far more important. But as with Truss, there's sort of the economy point and how you deal with that. And then you can certainly make that situation worse by being a bad communicator.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be interesting to see on Wednesday how he performs at PMQs.
Nice. Well,
Nice.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Big changes.
Big change.
Potentially big changes in odds heading forwards to 2024. We seem not to have changed viewpoint too significantly, but as you say, anything could happen. We do, though, as you mentioned at the start, we do need a new title for the podcast. We can't be called Trust Issues for much longer. These are issues created by Trust, so I'm happy for a couple more weeks.
You
We've
could
got
just put a little
time.
apostrophe on the end. It's Truss's issues.
Yeah, exactly. But we do need a new title. I'm presuming... Oh, there's one final question, I guess. One, give us your suggestions for titles.
Yeah.
Two, presuming the new title is another kind of pun on Sunak, do we think he's likely to last all the way till 24, or do you think there's a chance, no matter how remote, that we could need another title before we reach there?
There's a chance. There's always a chance.
You mean chance?
Oh,
It's mean. Go on.
cheap shot.
Cheap shot.
Cheap shot.
Sorry.
Can I do that again?
No,
Yeah,
no,
no, go
let
for
the
it.
Northerners attack him in the comments.
Yeah, sorry, Northerners.
Don't cut that out.
It's very true. Yeah, I do. I think there's a chance. I think it's more remote than it obviously was with Truss. You know, and it's quite early. It's quite early to say.
Yeah.
But if he does go, I would presume it won't be nearly as quickly as Truss.
We'll get more than 40 days out of it.
He's not gonna be. Yeah, we're gonna get more than 40
Good for you.
days
So it
out.
has to be a good title.
Yeah. I agree with Ben. Yeah.
You think there's a chance?
I think that is. Yeah.
Thanks for watching one of the last episodes of Trust Issues. Let us know your suggestions in the comments.
Nice.
Goodbye.